Okay, let us get started. So good evening, everybody. I am Josh Newman. I'm proud to be the moderator of today's event. I'm sitting in a chair tonight because my back is out, so I've never actually done pot or taken THC, but if anybody has it this evening, I would probably take it. You could watch me. So before we begin, just a little bit about NUFF. Actually, before we begin, let me just welcome two members of our community that deserve special recognition. Jane Flory is here from the Fullerton City Council. Welcome, Jane. And to her right, none other than Minor Duncan, longtime member of the Fullerton Elementary School. So thank you. A little bit about NUFF for those of you who are not members. Neighbors United for Fullerton is a nonpartisan, nonprofit community organization formed in 2003 to provide a gathering place for information and thoughtful discussion on local issues, concerns, elections, and government activities that affect quality of life here in the city of Fullerton. In the spirit of its mission, NUFF offers free, open public forums on topics of community interest and civic involvement, like this evening's. NUFF's programming is deliberately geared to those interested in what's making a difference in our community, from how personal choices like landscaping and water use can affect the environment, to broader public issues that impact our community in areas such as local education opportunities, land use policies, support for the arts, housing affordability, mental health services, and more. All NUFF programming is free and open to the public, which is why memberships are encouraged to help support our efforts. The funds raised by NUFF's modest annual dues, which are currently $25 per member, go toward paying for the rental of venues like this, at which NUFF's quarterly forums are presenting for advertising these events in the Fullerton Observer and on social media, as well as supporting local candidates in elections that NUFF's members believe will make a positive difference for Fullerton at the local level. If I could just ask the members of the NUFF board who are here to raise your hands. So these are the folks who do all the hard work. And most importantly, Gene Hegel in the back is our treasurer. He will gladly accept your $25. The topic for this evening's forum is legalized cannabis. I think the ad we had in the Observers was, is there a place for cannabis in Fullerton's future? I wanted to do cannabis, can't live with it, can't live without it, but I was voted down. You like that better. We are glad to have with us this evening three distinguished members of a panel. First, Fullerton City Council member Ahmad Zahra. Our very own Chief of Police, Bob Dunn. And Richard Hammond, CEO of 888 Hospitality. Each of our panelists deliberately brings a very different perspective to the topic at hand. To start, I'm going to provide a really quick, or hopefully reasonably quick, background and context for this evening's topic, and then we're going to invite our panelists to respond to some questions related to the topic. Once those have been discussed, we'll take questions from the audience. Our procedure here at NUFF for questions is somebody, Joanne, wearing the very spiffy NUFF t-shirt, which you could have if you join NUFF, has index cards. If you please write your questions down the cards, we'll try to read as many or all of them, time permitting. A little background and context for this evening's forum. Medical marijuana has been a featured life in California since 1996, when voters passed Proposition 215, also known as the Compassionate Use Act, by a margin of 56 to 44%. The passage of Prop 215 made California the very first state in the nation to legalize medical marijuana. In the 23 years since, attitudes toward cannabis and its use have continued to evolve, ultimately leading to the passage in November of 2016 of Proposition 64, which legalized recreational marijuana in California. Recreational marijuana sales became legal in California on January 1st, 2018, marking a major milestone for the state's cannabis industry and its customers, as well as creating the opportunities and challenges for localities such as Fullerton, which we will be discussing this evening. And while Prop 64 legalized the recreational use of cannabis in our state, the legal and regulatory structures it created to do that, which are overseen by the California Bureau of Cannabis Control, still do not offer California consumers complete freedom to buy, grow, and smoke marijuana just anywhere they please. In reality, the rules governing cannabis consumption are fairly strict, and they are consequential for anybody who wants to sell, purchase, consume, or transport cannabis in California. Under California law, adults 21 and up are allowed to buy 1 ounce of cannabis per day. That's enough material to fill, I'm told, a few dozen joints. You can alternately purchase up to 8 grams of the type of cannabis concentrate found in marijuana edibles, such as candies, brownies, and breakfast bars. The exact number of edibles you can legally possess depends on the product itself. A can of cannabis butter, for example, contains a large amount of concentrates. It's much more than a single edible, so concentrate-heavy products could put the carrier over the legal limit if they're not careful. And no matter what kind of cannabis you want, you can only buy it legally from a state-licensed recreational dispensary. The cost of products from a licensed dispensary include a statewide 15% tax on all recreational medical cannabis products, plus any additional local taxes and fees. In Oakland, for example, the added local tax is 10% for recreational pot and 5% for medical cannabis. One consequence of these multiple layers of taxation is that the cost of legal cannabis currently remains far higher than cannabis on the black market, raising concern that, despite legalization, too many consumers will continue to rely on underground sales, thereby undermining the legal market that has been created. California law still bans lighting up or snacking on any marijuana products while driving or riding as a passenger in a car. That includes cannabis edibles. The law also regulates how and where consumers can store marijuana while in a car, similar to the state's open alcohol container rules. With legalization, California law enforcement has placed an emphasis on better detection of impaired drivers. Whether the impairment is due to alcohol or marijuana, the same DUI penalties apply to both sets of drivers. Despite legalization, Californians remain very limited in where they can legally consume cannabis products. To stay within law, cannabis can currently only be consumed on private property. Smoking marijuana where tobacco is prohibited is also illegal unless there is a local ordinance expressly allowing its usage. This includes school campuses, restaurants, bars, public parks, and hospitals, essentially any public building. Property owners and landlords may ban the use and possession of cannabis on their properties, according to the State Department of Health. Prop 64 allows local governments to permit cannabis consumption at public locations with local approval. Cities across the state, from West Hollywood to Palm Springs to Sacramento, are considering permits for lounges and cafes where smoking marijuana would be legal on site. San Francisco and Oakland have already opened cannabis lounges where people can legally smoke, vape, and eat marijuana products. These lounge doors are prohibited from allowing people to consume alcohol or tobacco in the same venue. You cannot consume or possess cannabis on federal land, such as national parks, even if the park is in California, and it is illegal to take cannabis across state lines, even if you are traveling to another state where cannabis is legal. As it relates to employment, there is no state law that protects employees from termination for using marijuana. Prop 64 included specific language empowering employers to tailor their drug policies according to their wishes. A 2008 Supreme Court decision ruled that employers are entitled to fire employees who fail a drug screening for marijuana, regardless of the existing state law. Employers who contract with the federal government may prohibit cannabis use as well, since those employers must defer to federal law, which still classifies marijuana as an illegal drug. With regard to the use of cannabis around children, current rules on smoking marijuana around kids depend on whether you rent or own your home. There are currently no explicit limits on smoking marijuana around kids in a home you own, unless your home is being used as a daycare facility or as transitional housing under state law. Because marijuana is still listed as a Schedule I drug under the Federal Controlled Substances Act, there's also the complication that marijuana is legal in California while still remaining illegal at the federal level. And since cannabis remains illegal under federal law, and the federal government oversees all U.S. banks and credit unions, banks remain averse to offering bank accounts to businesses engaged in cannabis-related activities. The current failure to find a policy solution to the banking question at the federal level has created several economic challenges and costly unintended consequences. Because cannabis is still illegal under federal law, any bank that handles marijuana money can be charged with money laundering. This compels the banking industry, the marijuana industry, to deal with large amounts of cash, making the businesses targets for violent crime and making it difficult for states to track and collect the tax revenue they're owed. At the legislative level, there's been talk of opening state-run banks to serve the marijuana business. A recent report from California regulators, however, deemed the idea as still extremely problematic. In January of this year, the State Bureau of Cannabis Control approved a new regulation that allowed home deliveries statewide, even into communities that banned commercial pot sales within their jurisdictions. Cannabis companies and consumers have pushed for this change with regulators in Sacramento since vast stretches of the state either continue to ban pot activity or have not yet set up rules to allow legal sales. As they argued, that meant residents in those areas were effectively cut off from legal marijuana purchases, even though sales are permitted for adults in California. This change was vigorously opposed by police chiefs and other critics who expressed concern that it would create an unruly market of largely hidden pot transactions while undercutting control by cities and counties. Taxes on marijuana can work a bit like a double-edged sword. If they're set too low, the legal version leaves money on the table. If they're set too high, then the black market may present the more attractive option to consumers. The 2016 ballot measure legalizing recreational marijuana passed in 2016 with 57% approval, but that relatively broad support has not translated to support at the local level among municipalities licensing marijuana business. And while Prop 64 legalized recreational cannabis use in California, in order to legally operate a cannabis-related enterprise in California, a business must secure not only a state license, but local approval as well. As of the beginning of this year, only 35% of California's cities and counties were allowing some type of cannabis-related activities. By way of example, while Colorado currently has 562 licensed recreational marijuana stores, California, with a population of more than 6 times, has only 620 licensed cannabis shops so far. Orange County, our home, is still the most restrictive county in Southern California when it comes to marijuana, with nearly all of its cities forbidding any business enterprise, while only allowing people to grow a small number of plants for personal use only, which is mandated under state law. Santa Ana is the only Orange County city to allow retail sales of marijuana at the present time, and Costa Mesa now has a manufacturer, a distributor, and a company that does both, with more than 24 other marijuana-related businesses in various stages of the city's approval process. Closer to home, the city of La Habra is in the process of permitting up to 4 cannabis testing labs and 4 distribution centers. Here in Fullerton, when it comes to the cannabis industry, we're still basically at the starting line, which is why we're having this discussion this evening, and which is why we're fortunate to have each of our panelists with us. So we'll get to that portion of the program. And if I please ask, starting with Councilman Zahra, just a brief opening statement from each, and very quickly touching on your attitude toward cannabis.
Right. It's hard to catch up there. A lot of information in like 5 minutes. Thank you very much for NUFF for hosting this, and thank you, Mr. Senator.
Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Moderator, for inviting me to be part of this panel. I would have liked an easier panel, but this is good too. I do want to say that before I start, we do have 2 of our council members here, in addition to myself. Our mayor, Jesus Silva in the back.
Welcome, Mr. Mayor, sneaking in.
And also Jan Flory, our council member. So because of that, I want to make sure I'm talking in generalities so that we don't have any particular violations of Brown Act, the fun Brown Act. So we're gonna cover a lot of the topics here. So I'm gonna keep my introduction brief. I just want to give a little background of my own personal life that I think would be relevant to this discussion. So as some of you may know, in my early career I studied medicine. And I am a physician, and even though I don't practice in the United States, I studied medicine. I got my degree from Damascus University, and then did my specialty in pathology and neuropathology, and I did that in England and in Syria. When I came to the United States, I completely shifted gear and went to follow my dream of making movies, and that was my next 20 years of my life doing film production. But I wanted to give you that I've got a background in science, and the other thing is that I want to share, which I don't really share too often, but I do want to share this because I think it's also relevant. It's a little something personal that happened to me several years ago. I got hit with an autoimmune illness, and it affected my entire body. And there was a period of time several years ago when I couldn't even move, I couldn't grip, I lost a lot of my functions, my mobility. And as a result of that, I kind of got into this situation of chronic pain. And there were no medicines that could really help me. And until today, I got out of the acute phase, but I am living in the chronic phase of this. It's a type of fibromyalgia with other mechanical components. I have a pretty bad joints. I've got I've got shoulder dysfunctions and I've got hip dysfunctions and so on. And I do live with chronic pain, so I just wanted to be open about that. The reason is because there was really no medicine that was able to help me. And I refused to take antidepressants because that was the ultimate thing that they started pushing on me. And we know how doctors can be, I certainly do. Especially when you get a chronic pain, a person who becomes almost nagging in a way. And so I did consider cannabis. I considered that it was the only option left for me. But I was very reluctant. I was very reluctant, and I did go get a prescription, and I never filled it. So that is my story on this. But so I manage my pain in other ways. Is this something that I will pursue? I do not know, personally. So I just want to give my background on this, as far as how I see things personally. Now, I'm also, because of my background, I also like to think of myself as an objective person. And I do, if anybody's paid attention to city council meetings, I analyze things to death. And I ask a lot of questions. And I think ultimately I'd like to come to conclusions and decisions that I feel would be not only beneficial for us in the moment, but also how do we see these decisions on city council impact 140,000 residents over the next 50 years. So this is where I come from as far as what is relative to this discussion today.
Very good. Second up, Chief of Police, Bob Dunn.
I thought I got to the last.
Oh, if you want to arrest him on now.
He's good. So the senator kind of did a really good summary of where the laws are today. And from a policing perspective, it is my job to ensure that our police department here in Fullerton is responsive to the will of the people, and that was the voters in Prop 64. And then our city council, they set the tone locally for what we can and can't do as it relates to enforcement of these types of locations. And so we take our cues from them and we will do what we're asked to do. And that's pretty simple. Now, that wouldn't come without consultation. I mean, as a profession, the profession of policing, especially in the state of California, was incredibly reluctant to get behind this effort for a lot of reasons. And we did a lot of talking to our partners in Colorado and Washington State, other areas where it's legalized. And there kind of was fraught with issue. I think when you heard the senator kind of go through it, we had an opportunity in California to really do the homework that the other states missed, and instead we passed it, and now we're trying to catch up like every other state is. And that's unfortunate, but that's the reality that we live in. So from a policing perspective, just to sum it up, we're responsive to the will of the voters. Prop 64 is the law, and we will enforce that law that way. And then as far as the city council goes, they set the tone locally, and we will be responsive to whatever their direction is.
Thank you, Chief. And our third panelist is Mr. Richard Hammond, the CEO of 888 Hospitality, which has sort of the core of its business is in the hotel business, but which is looking at cannabis-related activities given the new framework in California. So Richard is the perfect person to discuss this topic from that perspective today.
Just don't throw anything at me for those of you. I am pro-cannabis. I've been pro-cannabis all my life. I grew up in Cerritos, California. Do you guys know where that's at, obviously? I'm Korean. I was born in Korea. I came here when I was 3. I went to Cerritos High. I know this area very, very well. I worked for Hilton Hotels for about 17 years. I was a general manager at 3 of their hotels. So I have a lot of experience in the hospitality industry. I sat on the CBB boards of Anaheim, CBB boards of Costa Mesa. I've had a lot of experience in business. Looking at this space, I know that there's a lot of negative connotation, but if you all look at the positive connotations of what this could be for the city, as well as the community, I think there is an ability to kind of put the puzzle together. There's a lot of cities in the area that are doing it, and one thing, Senator Josh, you missed was Irvine is actually doing testing facilities right now. There's actually 2 testing facilities that are friends of mine that actually test cannabis in Irvine, California. Weed Maps, which is the #1 app on your phone, which doesn't touch the Schedule 1, is actually based in Irvine, California as well. There's a lot going on in California, and I think California, with the advent of Prop 64, the voters have spoken and said, this is what we want. It's really up to the community. And I'm here just as an objective point of view to tell you my side of the story, so you kind of understand that side of it. Our primary focus in hospitality is hotels, restaurants, bars. That's what we enjoy. But if you look at what's going on with ABC, Alcohol Beverage Control, and how they do want to regulate this, look back to Prohibition. It was illegal then. It's the same thing. It's just going through the rough edges now. If we just set up the foundation, policing, council, community, then I think all of us can win. And it's not about money for me sitting up here. I know many of you may think, Richard, the entrepreneur, all he cares about is cash. That's not it. It's the safety and community of my family too. I live in Mission Viejo now. I have a 3-year-old child. And, I worry about what his educational level is going to be. How are we teaching our kids about weed, marijuana? Are we teaching them the safe uses of marijuana as opposed to what happens with alcoholism? Same thing. And it's kind of I get that it's two different elements, but it still is a drug. Both of those are still drugs. So that's kind of my intro to myself. If you have any other questions after about my hospitality side, we can do that. We do have legal investments in the cannabis space. For those of you who know Desert Hot Springs, they're very big into the space right now. We have about a 625,000 square foot indoor grow going on right now. And it's going to be gobbled up by Canadians. That's what's going to happen. And I see it because all the Canadian markets are coming full on board by July of this year. What does that mean for the US? A lot. We just have to be very cautious of how we look at this on a federal level as well as a state level. So that's pretty much it. When I met with Josh, we were at a lunch with, can I talk about this, Josh? I don't know.
Not in front of the chief, believe me, everybody else.
Okay, thank you.
No, absolutely.
Okay. We were sitting down actually with Fiona Mall. For those of you who don't know who Fiona Mall is, she's the state treasurer of California. She was just elected into office now. And Josh and I were sitting there and we were trying to figure out banking. Because listen, Prop 64 was approved, it's fully legal. We just got to figure out how to monetize this for the state of California. This is the 5th largest GDP in the world. We're number 5 in the world, just our state. Imagine what we can do on an $18 billion business. I mean, that's what this is going to be. It's huge, it's big. And that can go to all the issues. The one thing I was talking to Bobby on, for those of you who don't know Bobby on is the czar of cannabis for LA County. I was just talking to him 2 days ago, and I was asking him the questions of what's going on in the county of LA. Well, there's a lot going on in LA County, but one thing that he doesn't like is that all of the taxation money goes to a general fund. And as council members and as mayor and as community, we all have to be very careful that not all of that taxation money goes into a general fund, which can be spent by anyone in LA County. What it should be go towards is education, right? Medical research. And what I mean by education is start at the children's level. Start at the 16, 17, 18 to explain to them what this is. And then obviously policing and enforcement. Because the illicit market, you can't apparently, that black market, that illicit market that's there is self-deprecating. And it starts because we don't tax properly. What happened in Colorado is absolutely terrible. What happened in Portland, Oregon, absolutely terrible. And for those of you who don't know, there's a lot going on in these other states that we can learn from their errors and their mistakes. And this is what the czars of cannabis in these counties are trying to do. They're trying to learn from the mistakes that people are making on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you. So that's actually a good segue into question number 1. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, California policy currently provides for 2 seemingly conflicting facts. On the one hand, the policy framework implemented under Prop 64 allowed for a substantial amount of local control by giving cities discretion in issuing licenses for cannabis-related enterprises within their boundaries. But on the other, in December last year, the California Bureau of Cannabis approved a policy which allows any licensed cannabis delivery service to deliver to any customer in California, irrespective of that city's local cannabis policy. What are your respective thoughts on that decision and the policy implications it creates? We'll start closest to me with Chief Dunn.
So I mean, I think I kind of summed it up in my opening part to begin with. The legalization of marijuana is the people have spoken. We have to respond to the laws that are on the books, and we will do that. The same thing with the delivery mechanism. What I think happens at the policing level is people are confused about what's legal and what's illegal, and we are kind of the tip of that spear. So we will get a call, and we need you to come out and investigate. It looks like they're delivering marijuana here. We'll do a workup on it. What that will likely result in is a lot of effort for very little return on anything. Maybe some community education necessary, but again, we're at the tip of that spear with little resource as we try to work through those kind of issues. Once we have the education piece there and the calls diminish, then maybe we can focus on other parts of that. One of the other things that I think came along with legalization that I don't think gets captured a lot is where people do it. Now, you're supposed to do it on private property, but when you live in an apartment complex and you want to go to your balcony and do your marijuana and it makes its way into somebody else's apartment, we get those calls all the time. All the time. We spend a great deal of time trying to track down where that's coming from and having a conversation with a neighbor about being a better neighbor as they try to recreate with their marijuana. So there is a lot of knock-on calls that go along with this that we don't spend our time enforcing, we spend our time educating. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess my turn?
Please.
So the question is, it seems like it's the discrepancy between what is happening at the state level and the local level. And I think what municipalities, in my opinion, should be moving towards is how to coordinate this better. And that means creating the rules and regulations that allow for the control of these deliveries or the presence of cannabis within our cities. Because if we don't, it's being delivered anyway, right? The state is saying this is where we're heading, and so what do? We can't shut our city. We can't build a wall around our city, right? So what do? We just let it happen, and it does create a dilemma for our police. So that's resources that are being wasted instead of pursuing real crime, because it's not a crime to conceal it. So I think that it's better to work with within the frameworks of the state. We are a general law city, so we have to abide by those rules. And so, and make sure that we are putting together a framework that works for us and is regulated, so we're in control of our destiny and not the other way around.
Can I add one thing?
Certainly.
One of the other pieces I wanted to touch on is there is this disconnect between the state and the federal level as well, as it relates to how you can purchase marijuana. And all of these businesses are cash businesses, which create an environment where they can often become victimized. If you live in a particular neighborhood and is getting a delivery, it won't take long for people to realize the pattern of delivery. And I would bet a paycheck at some point that driver is going to be robbed for the money that they're carrying, because it's all going to be done via cash for now, until the feds and the state get together and figure out some way for the commerce part of it to happen. And I don't see that happening anytime in the near future.
I appreciate it. Just to add, where you have a lot of cash, you're gonna have guns, right? Mr. Hammond.
If I can just tag on to that, a lot of the dispensaries that are fully legalized in Santa Ana do take credit cards. There's not a wholly based, cash-based business anymore. There's people that will pay the service fees that come with paying with credit card, A. B, the only issue that the state of California really is having is with Social Security and some of the benefit taxes that you pay. What the LA County has done is there's 2 days a week that they will take the cash payments from these dispensaries and these cultivation labs, and they switch these days based on, they don't want it to be the same day every single time, obviously because of law enforcement, because it is a very cash-heavy business. But I own a bar in Laguna Beach, and it's very cash-heavy as well. And the way that we do it is we have ATM machine types of machines where the servers or the bartenders or whomever it is, when they get cash receipts, cash deposits from paying guests, it goes straight into this vault that gets picked up by a Loomis vault machine, not, you know, on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, or what have you, and it's all recorded into our bank account. So, you know, for us to sit here and say, you know, because it's a heavily, and I'm sorry, Chief, because you have the gun and I don't, but it's hard for me to sit here and say that that's the cause of it. I'm going to tell you the cause, well, at least what I've read, the three main causes of why the crime factor is occurring. The first, and I don't know if I should get into this now or just talk about delivery. Let me just talk about delivery real quick. You know, I have a saying in my company, either get on the train, get off the train, or or derail the train, but that's a whole different story. This is one of these, this space right now is very time sensitive. Either y'all in Fullerton need to get on the train or you get off the train, and that's fine too. I'm not saying I want a dispensary. I'm not saying I want a cultivation. I'm just expressing to you my opinion. You're gonna get gobbled up. These cities and these municipalities will start doing this because federally it will get legalized. It's not gonna stop. Canada is fully legal right now. You know how many, do you guys know what Roth Capital is? It's a capital conference down in Orange County. I go every year. The last 3 years, one full day of the Roth conference was talking about cannabis. Not hemp, not CBD, cannabis. Because a ton of US money is going into Canada. It is, because it's fully legal there, and they're growing it like crazy. Now, there are some issues that we have to be careful of. The actual material coming into the United States is gonna be a problem. Your outlying communities up there in the northern part of the US, that's gonna be a problem. It's going to be an issue, and people don't really see it, but it's going to be a major issue. The price of a pound of marijuana in California right now is about $600 for a decent THC content. It used to be, before it was legalized, about $1,500. In New York, that same $500 pound you can sell for $3,000 in New York. So if you're a gangster and you're doing illegal activity, where are you going to sell your marijuana to? You're not going to keep it in the state of California. But we all need to regulate it, and we need to self-regulate this as a community, again. And policing is very important for me, trust me. The sheriff and I have been talking about this, you know, for a long time now. Don Barnes is a very good friend of mine, and we've been talking about these things. And so he's like, I'm just gonna follow the law. That's what he says, and I'm assuming, Chief, that's exactly what you're doing, what you're here to do. This delivery is all about supply and demand. It's all about demand in your city. And there is demand in your city, trust me. People are coming here delivering marijuana to your residents, and you're not getting any benefit from it. You know, I had lunch here down the street at Matador, and just walking through the community, and I haven't been here in a long time. My brother-in-law lived on the Harbor Boulevard up here by the train station. But the homeless population has grown significantly in Fullerton. So, I'm sorry?
It'll grow even more.
Exactly. And we have to figure out how we're going to do this. Where are you guys going to get the money?
No.
Wait, let's stay. We'll have a question and answer session. I'm sure we'll get to this.
So,
let's stay
as far as I'm concerned, the delivery, it's happening. You might as well tax it. You might as well try to monetize it a little bit more. That's kind of my stay on that.
I can see we're going to have a lively discussion and see if this is good.
I may leave early though.
You may be chased out. So, next question. There are many types of cannabis-related activity that might be implemented in Fullerton. There's retail, cultivation, distribution, delivery, of course, on-premise consumption, home garden cultivation, etc. As a reference point, consider the Kimberly-Clark facility is being decommissioned. It's about 12 acres. It represents an opportunity for somebody, and prospectively somebody in this business, if it were legal and licensed in Fullerton. So what are your opinions, each of you, on the pros and cons of each of these activities as it relates to either public safety, to fiscal implications, or Richard, just as good business opportunities?
You want me to start?
You start, why not?
Self-containment is the best way to do this. If you can find an area where you say this is the area for cannabis campuses, not only for education, but testing, growth, dispensary, consumption, then you can kind of put it in one general area where you can look at it as this is where we need to watch what's going on and see and regulate it and see what's happening and see how it's happening. And that Kimberly Clark area that we looked at might be a good area for something like this.
Chief Dunn?
That would make us a destination city.
Be a pretty big
Which
location.
is what Ahmad's been talking about.
Aren't you glad you agreed to do this, Ahmad? But so either one, and you don't have to respond to each of the questions, but I'm just trying to keep things.
Go ahead,
I-
let's do this as well.
My answer is pretty simple. The law is the law, and we'll enforce the law, whatever that law is. As they relate to each other in other states, and I'm not familiar with the current status of things here as it relates to how this is being rolled out, but each individual entity has to be separate. So you can't grow and sell. You have to they bifurcate the businesses so that no one person has monopoly on the entire chain. And that seemed to be successful in some. I'm sure Mr. Ahmad has different thoughts, but just being creative in the way that we look at how that chain goes, if the will of the people is for it to remain legal and it to roll out in our community, then being smart about how we do that.
And Councilman Zahra?
So this is really about policy making, right? So it's about setting policies that make sense, that allow for public safety and allow for also generating revenue and so on. This, just like anything else, when anything new comes to, if you look back at the century when cars first were invented, people were freaking out about cars, and what happened? We built roads, and we paved them, and we regulated them. We put traffic lights, and ultimately seat belts for personal safety. Same thing with alcohol. Any new product, any new item that comes to any market, humans tend to regulate, because that is what we do as humans. We like to organize things and we like to regulate them. And I think this shouldn't be an exception, because it is legal at the state level, and like it was mentioned, I see it being legalized also federally in the near future, maybe, or maybe down the line. But this is the road we're heading down. So do we keep our, do like the monkeys, here to, close our eyes and ears and say we're not going to do anything, it doesn't exist, let's, pretend it's not here? Or should we just say it's here, let's see what we can do to control it, to regulate it so that it's safe? We have to have all stakeholders involved in this. I think that the business community also needs to be a part of it. The schools and should be a component. Our school districts need to weigh in as far as their opinions on how it affects education and children. And of course, public safety. What are their thoughts and their opinions on how to properly manage this and in a most efficient way? And ultimately, also rules on revenue and how to actually bring in the revenue to the city and how that revenue is being distributed and where it goes. There are many types of businesses. There's the retail side of things, and there's also the manufacturing side of things, which I think would be, what I know of it is that it creates local jobs. It's an industry that can actually, it pays actually union wages. A lot of the cannabis dispensaries and some of the manufacturing are going union. So they're paying $25, $30 an hour with benefits. So I think for communities like South Fullerton, and Fullerton in general, we have a lot of lower income families. We've got folks who are needing upskilling or a new kind of job that would help them get out of their economic situations. I think an industry like this could potentially be something that would help our community ultimately get those job security. So I don't want to dismiss this just because it's new, just because I don't personally consume it. But we have to look at, when you craft policy, you got to look at the pros and cons. And when we're looking at the pros of this, in my opinion, it outweighs the cons, especially that the cons have become more of a personal, ideological opinion than it is a practical or objective point of view. When we're looking at, to me, I look at my area, my neighborhood, the district I represent, and I see potential for folks to get jobs, and that could all go back into the city. Revenue from manufacturing could go into public safety, could go into education, could go into our infrastructure. We are struggling as a city financially, so we do need to look at new sources of revenue. We need to look at new emerging businesses, not just cannabis, but other industries, solar and so on. We have to start being proactive about this, and I think this is also one industry that we need to seriously look at from that perspective.
And short of getting Chief Dunn upset at me, there is a state regulation that allows micro business licenses, which allow manufacture, cultivation, and consumable all in one location. Cathedral City has one that's actually done by a good friend of mine, who's a Be Real with Cypress Hill, is opened up his shop there. That's consumable, dispensary, and cultivation, as well as manufacturing. So there, it does exist. It's just harder to get because it's all based on what the city wants, what it wants to do, not necessarily based on what the state wants to do.
Very good. So staying with the question of sort of the implications, the impact on a city, how do we as a city ensure that whatever cannabis-related activities are allowed to take place in Fullerton do not have a negative impact on young people especially? And Ahmad, if you wouldn't mind taking this one first.
Sure. I think, so the problem is that young people are exposed to it already. And the way I'm seeing is right now with dispensaries popping up, the illegal dispensaries, the black market dispensaries, they're popping up in areas that are not under the rules and regulations of the city. We don't even know where they're popping up. And they're coming out in neighborhoods, next to schools, and they tend to target the youth. They target young people because they're consuming it. There's also the other issue that I have with the black market cannabis, is that we don't know what quality it is. So there's a quality factor, and there are a lot of people, a lot of drug rehab facilities and folks that I talk to that say a lot of the people that come to them start off on cannabis that it's laced with fentanyl. And not because of the cannabis, it's what's being added to it. And so we need to make sure that stops, right? And the only way is to make sure that we know what's being sold in our city. And so I want to make sure that doesn't happen in the city in whatever and however way. As far as if it were to be legalized in our city, then the revenue that's generated has to go, a part of it has to go to children education on drugs, on cannabis, and there has to be also, there has to be a community component and an education component to that. But also, I think it has to go towards public safety. I mean, we have a retention problem in our city. We have an attrition problem. We're short in 25, 26 officers, I think. If we use some of that money, that could be a potential for bringing more officers that could also start helping curb the problem of the black market. That would solve some of these problems, because you don't want a case where it's out of your own control. And that's when I think children are exposed more to the dangers of it than if it were under our control.
Anybody else on the panel? What's the law enforcement sort of point of view on children?
So we take our cues, of course, from the law. Of course, we don't want our children to be victimized or be exposed to this in a way that their parents don't want them to be. So we would take our cues from our policymakers, But at the same time, we would be reporting to our policymakers as subject matter experts in the field of law enforcement what we're seeing, you know, or what other municipalities are experiencing. So I would be sharing with the council, you know, areas where it's already legalized, what their children have seen, and just at least go into it all with an eyes wide open type of posture.
Appreciate that. So, was there anything to add here? No. Okay. So, assuming legalized marijuana is here to stay, which I think is a safe assumption, is it given that a legal market is better than an illicit market in California? How then, and this is really a question for Councilman Zahra, how do we ensure that the legal market succeeds? I love your Richard's feedback also, while ensuring the right balance between legal cannabis activities and public interest. And I guess, Ahmad, to your earlier points, it sounds as if you're saying that we need to create a policy framework in Florida that addresses the reality of legalized cannabis. So if so, what are your immediate thoughts on how to approach that?
So, obviously we have some council members here also, so I don't want to talk too much about
One left, so you have no Brown Act problem now.
About some of the details, but in general, like I said, if we don't craft policies that regulate any type of business or substance or product that comes to our city, then we are just, it is not in our control, and we are at its mercy instead of us being, it being at our mercy. And that is what good policy is. As far as, I kind of, it was two questions. What was the first part?
Well, the first part just takes into account that, and you addressed it, it's legal, it's the voters' will. And so the question at the local level, particularly in Orange County, where there's been a relatively small number of cities that have embraced or addressed cannabis activity in a meaningful way, what should we do first here in Florida?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to, this is a good start, having open discussions about this. Not everybody's going to agree. And we do have to listen to the community as well and the concerns, because part of also crafting policy is making sure that you're listening to everyone, whether it's public safety, whether it's the business aspect of it, how to generate, how to collect the revenue, how to spend the revenue, how it's allocated, and then also the community and its effects. And I'm an overthinker about things, so I do like to ask a lot of questions before making any decision. But we have to start asking the questions, and we have to start having these discussions. Otherwise, we're just going to be an ostrich with our head in the ground, and it's just going to be all around us, and we're going to be living in denial.
And so, Richard, if you would, as somebody who's dealt with numerous localities, what would your advice to Florida be? Where to start?
You know, I think the biggest thing that y'all need to do if you do want to get into this space is really be vigilant. Let me give you the example. LA County, when they went, well, not LA County, California, when they went legal, had over 32,000 farmers. 32,000 farmers growing cannabis, not hemp, cannabis. And out of the 32,000 growers, 3,500 of them applied for legalization. That's a problem. That's 10%, 10.9% of the growing population that wants to be legal. That makes no sense to me. Why aren't we going out there busting all the illegal grows? And so that was the question that I posed to the LA Council when I was up there talking with Damion, and he said, we just don't have the manpower. And I said, but you're taxing this 20%. Where is that money going? Then it goes to a general fund and it sits there and they use it for everything else but what they really need to enforce, which is shut down the illegal grows, shut down the illegal dispensaries, and just shut it all down and make everyone regulate the way you all want to be regulated. And that's what really needs to happen. It needs to be a vigilance. And yes, staffing is an issue, but listen, community staffing is the biggest, I think, win of anything. You know, y'all are out there, you all are walking, you all see what's going on. These are the kind of things that make a city, right? So that's what we need to do. We just all need to be very vigilant about it. I know it's a lot easier said than done, Chief. I get that piece, I really do. But That doesn't make any sense. 32,000 farmers and only 3,500 applied for legalization? That makes no sense at all, and no one's doing anything about it. Governor Newsom's not doing anything about it. They're just letting them grow in the Emerald Triangle. How many of you have been to Sacramento lately? There's so many dispensaries up there, right? And I guarantee you, 50% of them are illegal. And no one's shutting them down. That doesn't make any sense to me because they're losing tax money. You know, that's the biggest thing. This is about monetization. This is not about getting high, guys. This really is not. It's about monetizing this and keeping it safe. Just like booze. Just like booze.
Just like booze. So we're gonna move on to some of the questions. I'm gonna paraphrase a few of them, but I think you've touched on something interesting. This is for the chief. There is a certain amount of ambiguity between the medical cannabis industry and those dispensaries which are licensed to do medical cannabis and recreational cannabis. So in Fullerton, how are we addressing that? Are we comfortable that those dispensaries operating right now are only selling medical cannabis, or are you seeing some other issues around that?
No, we've seen plenty of issues. I think we had 5 or 6 and upwards to 8 illegal dispensaries operating in our city in the last, since I've been here 18 months. I think that we got the last one closed a few weeks ago, but it's still one of those things where Councilman Zahra mentioned that it pops up in an area that is near a school and we have to focus on it. In the city of Fullerton, that effort is initially led by code enforcement, assisted by the police department. If there's any type of crime that we find related to that, then the police department will take over. But as far as the enforcement of illegal dispensaries in Fullerton, the primary persons that do that is code enforcement. So we have seen illegal dispensaries pop up in our town.
And so the answer, in addition to enforcement, probably is some level of clarification with respect to the distance between, the definition between medical and recreational, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, medical marijuana has been around since 1996. All of us are very adept at dealing with that. When somebody presents their card, we don't bother them. And those particular locations generally operate without complaint because they're following some sort of rule base. The illegal dispensaries generally pop up, like I said, in those areas where it calls a lot of people's attention. We'll get dozens and dozens of complaints, and we'll focus on that particular location until we can get it closed down if they're operating outside the framework of the law. If it's a legal medical dispensary, then we're not worried about them as much as we're worried about the illegal dispensaries that are operating in our town.
So let me ask you a question. Now I'm curious. So I had a Chihuahua, and she got old, and she was in a lot of pain, and I'm not even kidding. And the woman at who took care of her nails said she's in a lot of pain. You should get her cannabis oil. And so I went to a dispensary, and it was actually quite interesting going through the whole process, kind of enrollment, and then purchase. But I never had to prove I had a prescription, and I think I could have bought anything on the premises. Does that sound in accordance with the law?
It doesn't. And were you in a recreational dispensary or a medical dispensary? I know.
Well, now I think it's a dispensary. I'm pretty sure. Well, so they never asked me for a prescription or anything. So I assume if it was a medical dispensary, I should have been there. And if it were a recreational one, they should have been there. And if anybody's wondering, she died shortly thereafter. She's a wonderful dog.
Right.
But she seemed at peace.
And I think the CBD oil you can get from your chiropractor. Now,
Okay.
anyway. You don't have to get, you can get CBD oil from your chiropractor.
No, I know, but it was interesting. So, and it's actually down on Harbor by the AMPM, and it's in an old auto dealership. And you go past the security guard, you go into this incredibly clean, nice white space with counters. Interesting, right? And I was mostly curious about how it worked. Didn't work. It turned out she died. So, next question.
Can I just say something on that, actually? So there is ambiguity because when recreational was legalized, then how you got it didn't matter anymore because the laws changed. So I think there is that ambiguity, and I think for the medicinal part of it, there's still a lot of research that needs to be done, I think, because the medical industry has not fully embraced it yet as an actual medicine. And I think they will ultimately, when pharmaceuticals get their hands on cannabis, I think it will become a real medicine. But right now, I think probably the makers of Tylenol and the makers of Advil don't want that because they don't have a piece of the pie. Just throwing that out there. But I think that ultimately, when the medical associations start embracing this, and it will happen ultimately, I think you'll start seeing more of the emphasis on getting a prescription and that being enforced through different means than what it is currently. So right now we're just living with that ambiguity.
Rich, anything to add?
No, good.
Okay. Next question, is marijuana being, and I guess this is for you, Chief, and just anecdotal information. I'm sorry. Is marijuana being manufactured, raised, or sold illegally in Fullerton right now? And if so, what's the extent of the problem?
I think I covered that in the last answer. And I don't know, I haven't looked at weed maps today to find it out, because I'll pop up, and usually we'll get a call within a day or two of their opening, and then we'll have to, I call it the Care Bear Stair, we'll do the Care Bear Stair there, and then we'll go to the next location when it pops up. So we've had up to 8 operating, and one of them was a really long-term problem for us. It took us quite a bit through more of a civil process to get through those.
And just as a follow-on, would you attribute any particular criminal activity, crime statistics to marijuana, or can you not separate them?
I don't think I wouldn't have anything to correlate. I wouldn't be able to prove my point, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any data to support those because we're not tracking them as they're popping up until they come up on our radar, and then we're not the lead agency in it. But what I will tell you is the communities who have them in there are acutely aware of their presence and do want the police and the city to take some action to close them down, immediately if not sooner.
And so the next question, this is for you, Ahmad, if you can answer this. Is there a city department for cannabis, which is I think the question is, what city agency, if not the city council as a whole, is your first stop for cannabis-related issues?
It would be. It's a little complicated because the police are very limited now in what they can do because it is legal, so they can't arrest people for possession or anything like that. So it really goes through code enforcement, and we are short-staffed. So it takes a while to get them shut down. Not only that, but also by the time it actually gets shut down, that maybe same owner has just opened up somewhere else in just the next street and the next street and so on. It's like whack-a-mole, and it's just not efficient, and it's taking away from our ability to enforce the code in other more serious things that I think are more serious, like like the subpar living conditions in some of our buildings that we have with landlords, and I think that is probably more of an important thing to do. So again, if we are more in control of the dispensaries, then we would relieve some of the work off of our code enforcement to do actually more important things. Also, I want to say that the fee, the fine was actually quite low, but state law just changed, and we have tomorrow on our agenda. It's on consent calendar. But anyway, it's on the agenda tomorrow, where our fees seems recommended by our staff to up it on the illegal dispensary, so they will get hit with higher fees if it is approved tomorrow, and that is in accordance with new state laws. It's really a way of cracking down on the illegal dispensaries by fining them, high fines so that they so they can stop and hopefully start legalizing. So.
Can you also penalize the landlord? Can't you always shut down the landlord and tell them that they're fined as well? Because I know a lot of cities are fining the landlords as well because they're the ones allowing it on their property.
And we have, and we also the one that was longest running the landlord was involved in the civil process with us all the way
Oh,
through.
oh.
And wanted them out, had no idea
That they
when they
were-
opened, that they opened under that guy's.
I see.
And so I found that the landlord generally will
Doesn't
work,
though.
right, and will work with enforcement efforts, or in this case, the civil efforts to go along.
The majority of the issues in LA County right now are the landlords do know. And they're allowing these people to open up dispensaries, cultivations, manufacturing, which they should be penalized for doing something illegal like that in that sense.
So I'm going to endeavor to read as many of the questions as possible, as closely as written as possible. So in the Wall Street Journal today, Colorado and Washington reported more than a 30% rise in driving deaths that within the article were directly related to recreational cannabis use. They also reported a soared violent crime since opening dispensaries in 2014. Chief, you spoke a little bit to this, so I'd love to hear Richard. You can talk about best practices. What do we learn from this? What are we going to do differently than these two states in California?
Here's my take on all of that. I've read, and I'm sure all of you sitting in the audience have read numerous articles on whether it's creating more crimes or less crimes, or I'm not really sure. Because I'm sitting here reading articles today. Huffington Post, for example, posted in 2/27/17 that there has been a 15% decline in violent crimes in California. In 2017, they said that, after the legalization of marijuana. In Colorado, post-legalization boom, the reason why the illicit market is there is because the taxation base is so high that people can't afford the cannabis inside the dispensaries. So what do? They create these illicit market where this 21-year-old kid in a backpack is growing 6 plants at home because it's fully legal to do that, and he's selling it on the corner of the dispensaries. So this is what's going on. So the three ways that we need to really, the three factors of high crimes is exactly this. When the weed boom happened, there was a lot of criminal activity in between there, and it's still going on because there is that illegal side of it. And if you have a dispensary that's illegal, and the criminals know that you're operating that dispensary and it's fully illegal, there's going to be crimes at that location, guaranteed. There's going to be crimes because people know that it's illegal, and the owners of those dispensaries will not A, report the crime because they are doing illegal activities themselves, and or B, there will be violent crimes in front of that dispensary. So my conversation with Bobby the other day was there's a dispensary in South Central LA where they had 3 shootings right outside of the dispensary. 2 of the 3 had nothing to do with the dispensary, but got counted as a dispensary crime. Then the third one was because they knew it was illegal, they never reported it, they stole a bunch of money from them and then ran away. So of course the owners of those illegal dispensaries are not going to create it. The second thing is, again, not all growers are legal. So what happens? You create a huge illicit market. And then post-legalization right now is the pricing levels of a pound of weed is different now than it used to be. When it was fully illegal, you couldn't buy a pound of marijuana for less than $1,500. I don't know this by experience, I know this by reading things and talking to the people that do it. Now you can buy a pound, as I said earlier, you can buy a pound of marijuana for about $300 to $500 and do whatever you want with it, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's turning it into something that's bad for the community as opposed to good for the community. So there's a lot of things that can happen there. So the pricing model is very, very important. In Oregon in general, they handed out licenses to every grower that came and applied. So what happened? There's an oversupply. So then what happened? That leaves Oregon, goes to other states, and becomes huge. It becomes a huge illegal activity. There's planes flying from, I guarantee you, there's private jets flying from California into New York City because they can get 4 times the revenue in New York City. You think any of those people are doing it legally? They're not paying any tax. They're getting it over there though, and they're selling it for a lot more. And that's the problem. Those are the problems that create the crimes. Again, there's a lot of regulatory stuff that needs to happen before a city like Fullerton accepts cannabis. But there's a lot of benefit to it too.
Okay, and again, I try to read, the folks who've come here, so I'm going to try to read questions I submitted, and this unfortunately is for the police chief. And you touched on this a little bit, but I wanted to be clear. I understand that you are duty bound to enforce the law, but as a law enforcement professional, what is your learned opinion as to the problems and challenges that would be introduced to our city if we allow pot to be grown and or sold here.
Sure. I came from Anaheim. In 2016, we hosted a symposium before it became legal in the state of California, a symposium of police chiefs, pro-cannabis folks who came down to the convention center, and they told us about the problems they've seen in Washington and Colorado, and then I don't remember where the individual who was pro-cannabis was from, but part of a conglomerate that was pushing the legislation. And what we learned were, and then, again, this is anecdotal, I'm telling you, it more asks for what I've learned, that in children, they've seen the increase in children going to the ER because oftentimes they'll overdose on THC if they get access to edibles at their parents' house. Now, I'm not saying that would happen here, but it's something that if we were in a room discussing the legalization, I would be offering up, right? There is a problem with drug driving in these states, and I think what part of their issue there was they didn't keep good stats for the first couple of years because they were still working out standardized field sobriety tests to encompass when you're high on marijuana. So I think that's one of those moving targets that we'll have to keep watching, but it certainly was something that they brought up anecdotally. Homelessness in like the city of Denver, for example, went up 100%. All these people flocked to an area where they thought they could get into an open market of marijuana, and it didn't turn out to be very open. There was a lot of big money that was able to kind of run it. And again, these are just things that they were sharing on the dais. I didn't go there and experience this myself. And so I think from a policing perspective, we know that, and it doesn't have to just be cannabis, it could be any type of illegal activity occurring on a street corner. Generally, that's where more illegal activity will occur. Or in the case of where you're using money only or you're transacting in cash rather than electronically, when somebody knows there's a lot of cash on hand. In Anaheim, we had certainly some crimes associated with that, robberies, that would take over robberies that would happen, or people would steal the ATMs right out of the businesses in the middle of the night when they were closed. So there is things that occur related to those types of facilities that we have experienced through our talks with others in this profession in the other two states that have legalized it before we did. And I think the message that they gave us then in 16 was, don't pass it until you figure out all the things that we're trying to figure out today, until you figure those out. And I'd say we're past that now. So we need to have a serious discussion about what it looks like.
Anybody else from Bill? Good?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of issues with any emerging industry. It's where you're going in sort of the unknown, and this is what you start looking at others and their experiences. Data collection is very important. I think we have now enough data to sort of start getting an idea on how to organize this in a more productive way. And really we need to start looking at things at this particular topic, just like any other topic, in an objective way, and seeing where does it, how does it work, and where does it work the most efficient. And again, talking with all the stakeholders, the public safety is, I think, the most important element in this, and they have to have a really good say in this so that we can craft policies that ultimately benefit the community overall instead of hurting us.
So, Ahmad, I mean, with that in mind, is there anything like a working group that currently exists within city government to look at cannabis-related policies? And if not, is that something that might be considered?
I don't know of any working group right now. I think it's just it's kind of just loosely coming in different forms, and just information here and there. I think I'm trying to educate myself on this because I know this is something that's happening already, and I'm trying to educate myself on it as much as I can, so that if it does ultimately come to council, we can make the best decision possible. And you look at things objectively. You look at the pros and you look at the cons, and you try to see how can you best craft a policy that makes sense. So.
Okay. Specific question from a member of the audience. I guess this is for the chief. What should somebody do if they live near to people that smoke marijuana and have children?
Well, I'd like to say have a conversation with your neighbor about the impacts it's having on you. I mean, I think all too often that's forgotten. It's 2019, we can still communicate with each other. If you figure out their cell phone number, text them maybe, that's the way people prefer to communicate nowadays. But have a conversation to start with, and if you're not comfortable doing that by yourself, it's certainly something that we could accompany you to do if it's something that's really bothering you to that extent, to open up the lines of communication. I think people, like anything else, they get used to it and they don't realize the impacts it has on other people. And if you open their eyes to that, or they can go the opposite way. You know, they become more, they smoke it more, and there's more issues. And then that one, I don't know what more I could do for you. I mean, it's the people of the state of California have spoken, and they legalized marijuana. And with that comes a host of other things like people smoking marijuana. And that's the reality we live in. But we certainly would be happy to partner with you in that dialogue if it's something you needed us to accompany you on the first time. It's not something we can do every week, but during that first conversation, if you're not comfortable, we'd be happy to go with you and just open up the lines of communication and try to keep things calm.
And if I may add to that, I think it's very important to also educate children on the negative effects on early childhood development and so on. So we have to make this part of our educational outreach to kids so that they don't use it or think it's a cool thing, because it does have it's a you know, you're consuming something into your body. It does have chemical effects on your body. So it has a negative effect on children, just like with tobacco. You know, there's a lot of resources now, educational resources, to educate kids on the tobacco and its effects on the body. So I don't see this as any different than that, and I think we need to start educating kids on this.
So the next question, kind of shifting gears, as somebody mentioned earlier, we have a revenue issue in Fullerton. And so I guess this question really is for Richard. It won't hold you to it, but if you wouldn't mind sort of working it through, what would you forecast as the projected revenue from sort of an aggressive embrace of cannabis in Fullerton?
Well, it's a loaded question because I think it's based on what you guys would allow, meaning, you know, if you allow us to do a 20,000 square foot cultivation, you know, you can get 700 lights in there. Each light will produce about 2.5 pounds of plant 4 times a year, maybe 3, 4 if you're lucky. You do the math. You know, usually you can get anywhere from $500 to $800 a pound, depending on the flavor and the strain that's produced from there. But you know, some guys have they're called OG strains, and a lot of the original strains that they have are worth $1,500 to $2,000. You know, the R.J. Reynolds and the Philip Morrises of the world they'll start cannabis growth. I know that for sure. But when they start it, they're going to start buying IP, intellectual property, because that's where the money's at. The money's not going to be in cultivation, because R.J. Reynolds has enough money they can grow their own plants themselves, you know, in Kentucky or North Carolina or wherever they're growing tobacco currently. So, you know, that's the one thing. If I can get back on that, I can't give you a revenue number until you give me square footage, footprint. What are you going to allow? Are you going to allow dispensary? Are you going to allow consumption? You know, the issue on the apartments, and listen, I have a 3-year-old, I understand, and I'm old, I'm 52, and I have a 3-year-old, and I don't want my 3-year-old smelling it. On my clothes, on me, when I smoke it, I don't want him smelling it, and I understand that. I do, I really do. But the apartments and the communities need to give a consumable area so you don't affect every other living person in that apartment complex, because it's not fair. It's not fair to either. It's not fair to you living next door to someone that's smoking weed, and it's not fair to that person because it's fully legal in his own private community of his house, right? So how do you do something like that? You just have to come up with a win-win solution, and I don't know that. I don't approach my neighbors. I don't. I'd be the first one to tell you that. And I know it's something, and it's hard enough to approach them and say hello. Imagine approaching them and asking them not to smoke marijuana. I mean, it's like telling someone you can't drink vodka tonight. You know, I mean, seriously, it really is kind of a similar thing. So having said that, you have to be very cautious on how you approach this element of it. And the consumable part is the hardest thing because the state regulators came up with all these laws, rules, regulations, and they never said you can consume it anywhere but your home. Okay, so now what happens? You have apartments, condominiums, townhomes, assisted living facilities. What if there's somebody that wants cannabis on an assisted living facility? What happens? Those are the kind of things that you have to worry about as a community.
I just want to be clear, I'm not advocating infringing on your neighbor's
Oh,
rights.
no,
I'm
saying
advocating
that.
having a conversation with the neighbor about their right impacting your right, that's all.
On the revenue, I want to just make a point here. Again, this is an industry. It's not something that is small anymore. It's what, 18 billion you said. So it's a business, and there's. I like to say that as an immigrant, there's always a libertarian side to all immigrants, and in that sense, I don't want to, prohibit people from being able to do business. I think that we're built on, we're the land of the free, and I think people, if it's lawful, they should be able to pursue their business in the ways they feel they should. So yes, our city is struggling financially, and you can see that the biggest symptom is our roads, and we have another symptom that we, in the police and in our public safety, our fire, and we lost 6-7 fighters to attrition to other departments, and this is something that's constantly going to be a struggle. So we do need to find new sources of revenue for our city, and business development is something I am pursuing at the city level. We have to have a good economic development in our city. We actually don't have an dedicated economic development director for in our city. So if we are to solve our financial problems, you want our roads fixed, we need to fix our financial problems. We got to get money in our accounts, and so we have to be looking at new emerging industries because the old industries are leaving. They're leaving because the world has changed, the global economy has changed. So we have to start looking at that in a very serious way, otherwise our quality of life is terrible. Because there was a lady who called me and said she's low income and she hit a pothole and it cost her $200 to fix her tire. So there is a financial impact, and if we don't fix our roads, people are going to struggle. And so it's not just aesthetics. And so we do need to be mindful of our local economy, and we need to make sure that we are creating jobs, and this is an industry that is bringing jobs and is coming with good middle-class wages. So I think it's time to have this discussion, and it's time to consider all options, and for me, all options are on the table. And this is one of them. And I hope that we can really look at the experiences of other cities, how they've done it, the errors, and learn from that, and then hopefully we can craft something ultimately that works for us. However that is. But if we don't do anything, we're gonna suffer as a result of that.
Thank you. We're getting toward the end of questions. I'm trying to get to all of them. So since pot was legalized in California, the illegal market is booming, as many of you point out. According to an April New York Times article, they can sell pot for 50% less than legal shops. In Los Angeles, legal shops are cutting staff and have little business, and as a result, very little by way of revenue are coming into the city from them. At the same time, LA is planning to spend millions of dollars to tackle illegal pot stores. So against that backdrop, the question, I guess this is for the advocates, cannabis advocates, how would legalization in that context and that environment help Fullerton?
If I can just speak, I think through attrition, a lot of the business people that don't know what they're doing are going to get out of business. And that's exactly what's going on in LA County. And in the same breath, the trajectory of the cost of marijuana is continually going down, but eventually it will level off. And once it levels off, the taxation to the cities are going to be greater than you guys can probably imagine. There's two ways of revenues for a city, in my opinion. There's TOT, which is transient occupancy tax, which are hotel rooms. And I only know this because I worked in a lot of big hotels, particularly at the Hilton in Anaheim, which was 1,572 rooms. So imagine.
Can you repeat what you said, TOT?
TOT, transient occupancy tax,
Transient
which is a
occupancy.
hotel occupancy tax.
Airbnb.
That's one of the biggest city revenue generators that a city could have.
What is it in Anaheim now?
I don't know what Fullerton is, 12 or 15%, somewhere in there.
That's in Anaheim, I think it's.
Anaheim's 24, I want to say, yeah. Anaheim's huge. When you go to New York City and you stay at the New York City Hotel and it's 38% occupancy
Oh my
tax,
God, it is
I don't know if you guys see that, and even parking is $85 a day for a car, or even San Francisco. The TOT up in San Francisco is huge. And majority of that goes to the city. The majority of that. The state gets a little bit, the Visit California gets a little bit of love, and then there's a sales tax that gets a little bit of love, but the majority of that TOT goes straight to the city's pocket. And you use it however you want, right? I mean, that's at least how I understood it. In the same breath, you just need to make sure that the taxation on the marijuana side is not crazy high, but really, because the state is what, 15%? I think something like that?
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah, and then, the cities add on to that. So for Desert Hot Springs, for example, they've done it really well because our cultivation, which is 600,000 square feet, will only be a set basis based on your square footprint, not based on what you sell. So you can there's many ways to skin this cat, you just gotta figure out how best to monetize for the city of Fullerton.
And so, Richard, this is a question, this is sort of a natural follow-on. Assuming, if and when Fullerton gets into licensing cannabis-related businesses, how should licenses be handled? Bidding seems fit for the already wealthy, it leaves little to no opportunity for anyone else at the moment. So what's the kind of best practice advice you can do there?
I think it's kind of like affordable housing, where you kind of sit down, you kind of generate who is applying, how many people are applying. You want to give some community love, right? The people that have been here a long time, that live here, that want to thrive in Fullerton, you want to give them a little love. So I think there's got to be that percentage. There's going to be, as soon as you guys open this floodgate, you don't even know what's going to happen. I mean, it's crazy out there how many people are in this space. It's mind-boggling that there's so much money for this space to build, to manufacture, to cultivate, to consume, all of it. So, there's many different ways to skin a cat, but I really think as council and as community, you guys need to sit down and go, okay, we want to give X percentage to people that live in Fullerton, because you want to give it back to the local community. And then there's an X percentage of people that come in from outside of Fullerton. There's a new thing that's going on in Colorado called narco-tourism. Have you guys heard of this phrase? Okay. So there's a hotel in Colorado called Bud and Breakfast. So what they do, it's not bed and breakfast, it's Bud and Breakfast. And what they do is you know what you're getting into, right? I mean, you're a full-grown, 21 and over adult. You're staying the weekend in Colorado, and they transport you from dispensary to consumable to dispensary. You get up in the morning, and that's what people are doing nowadays. Where are these tourism people coming from? Asia.
Wow.
Why? In Japan, it's highly illegal for you to smoke marijuana. If you smoke marijuana, you will go to jail for life. In Korea, it's the same way. In Singapore, you will get beaten to death, literally. I don't know exactly how they do this. But there's crimes out there that this is what it's like out there. They don't know what it's like because the government has always told them, don't smoke it. And that's the bottom line. And for those of you who have smoked it, there are some benefits and there are some drawbacks, of course, and the paranoia is one of them. But a lot of the things that are happening internationally are kind of coming to the hub of Colorado. If you Google the transportation into Denver International, once they became fully legal, and once they started advertising this narco-tourism, it became pretty big. The lift into and out of Denver International, and you can imagine what LAX would be like. Because LAX is like the hub. This is the hub of travel and tourism. You are literally attached to the hub of travel and tourism. And I've been in the city of Anaheim all my life. I started as a mailboy at the Hilton in Anaheim in 1988. Yeah. So I've done every job. And I get it. I've seen it, and I've seen the churn time and again, over and over again. But there is a lot of money to be made in this. And I'm not saying Fullerton's the right city for it, but for those that jump on, there is some money to be made, and it will help. I believe it.
I just want to add that just mention that CVS Pharmacy is now going to carry CBD. So,
And Walgreens as well.
and Walgreens.
Yeah.
So this is going mainstream, and there are products now.
For those of you who don't
Abundance of
know,
products.
the new Farm Bill, I'm sorry, Councilman. The new Farm Bill allowed, and it's fully legal. CBD is fully legal. You go into a Walgreens, you go into anywhere, CVS, you can buy CBD. We have a hotel in Laguna Beach, and Laguna Beach is the most conservative city that you ever, in that sense. In the smoking, they banned smoking. You can't even smoke cigarettes in the city of Laguna Beach. If your car makes a noise louder than 10 decibels, you will get pulled over and get a ticket. I don't want to. They opened up on PCH a CBD shop. How the hell did they open up a CBD shop in Laguna Beach? That's what I want to know.
Right.
Doesn't matter.
So if
CBD
any,
is the same, it's a derivative of the same plant, A.
But CBD also has several different levels of THC that is.
To be legally sold as CBD, it has to have less than 0.3% of THC. And true fact, if you don't have a 1 to 25 ratio of THC to CBD, it's not really good. And let me tell you why. My mom, who just had knee replacement, prior to her having knee replacement, she's 79 years old. I gave her a little bottle of CBD, which cost about $65 at a dispensary, which was a 1 to 25, so it had 1 ratio to every 25 CBD. And she put it on her knee, and it was unbelievable. She had back pain, she had back surgery too as well, a year ago. And the same thing, I gave her the CBD before she could actually get into the hospital to have the back surgery. And she wasn't high. She's not walking around like, oh my gosh, I'm high. No, that's not how it's like. It's a topical you put on your arm or your leg or your back. And the medicinal benefits of CBD only work with a ratio of THC. And it's proven, but there's a huge amount of snake oil out there. So ladies and gentlemen, be careful. Even licensed dispensaries are selling 100% CBD and saying, this is a miracle cure. Well, not necessarily. Just be very, very careful. A lot of it is placebo, I think. But either way, if it helps you, right? That's how I look at it.
thank you. So you actually have thoroughly answered one of our other questions. What is your opinion in regard to the current use of cannabis oil as a medication? And are there any other questions? I'm getting to the last one, which is less a question than a suggestion. And I like it. We could take a profit-sharing approach here in Fullerton. Each resident would receive a dividend of legal profits from cannabis movement. And I think that's a good note to stop on. So thank you so much to each of our panelists. Thank you all for attending.